Hello everyone, it's Jen from Old Tinker Studio. In this tutorial, we will be learning basic modeling in Blender 2.83. So let's get on with the tutorial. A common object type used in a 3D scene is a mesh. Blender comes with a number of primitive mesh shapes. When you start Blender, by default, you get this cube, which is a primitive mesh. Now let's learn how to add primitives to the scene. If the cube is not selected, left-click on it and select it, and then delete it using the delete shortcut key, which is X. If you want to add a primitive to the scene, you can do this by using the Add drop-down menu at the top of the viewport. We can also get this same exact menu by hitting Shift A. Please note, you have to make sure that your cursor is over the 3D viewport window when you hit Shift A. There are 10 standard primitive shapes in Blender: plane, cube, circle, UV sphere, icosphere, cylinder, cone, torus, grid, and the monkey, who is called Suzanne. In this case, we're just going to add a cube. If you look at the bottom left of the viewport, you will notice that you have a popover that gives you various options for each mesh. The best and easiest way to start modeling in Blender is to simply start with a primitive mesh and then reshape it, add detail, and turn it into the model you want. In order to edit any object, including primitives, you need to go into edit mode. By default, we are in object mode, where we can select the actual objects in the scene. Now let's take a look at how to actually reshape and edit objects in Blender. Left-click on the cube to select it if it isn't already selected, then delete it using the delete shortcut key, X. Now let's add a simple sphere using the shortcut Shift A. If you want to edit this sphere, we need to left-click on the sphere to select it if it isn't already selected, then hit the Tab key to go into edit mode. The easiest thing to do is just to select the single vertex and move it around. Make sure that you're in vertex mode by hitting 1 at the top of the keyboard. If we left-click on a vertex, we can use our Move, Rotate, and Scale tools to manipulate the vertex. It will make your life easier if you use the hotkeys while modeling. To move parts of the mesh, a vertex in this case, use the G key and then move the vertex. Now let's choose a face. Use 3 at the top of the keyboard to go into face select mode. In order to rotate the face, select the face and use the R key, and then move your mouse up and down to rotate the face. Now choose an edge loop. You can use 2 at the top of the keyboard. In order to scale, select the edge and then use the S key and move your mouse up and down. There are multiple ways you can select vertices, edges, and faces other than left-clicking. You can select the entire mesh by hovering the cursor over the mesh and using the L key. Alt-A will deselect a mesh. You can also deselect a mesh by clicking in a blank space on the viewport. You can also use the box or border tool via the shortcut of B and the left mouse button. You can also use the circle tool via the shortcut of C and the left mouse button. Another way of choosing multiple vertices is using the lasso tool via the shortcut of Control and the right mouse button. There is a potential problem with using these tools to make selections. If we tumble around to the back of the sphere, You will notice that we haven't selected the back-facing parts of the mesh. One way around this problem is to put the object in wireframe mode, hitting the Z key to bring up the pie menu, and then choosing wireframe. Another way around this problem is using the X-ray mode, which is available on the top right of the viewport. You can select multiple vertices, edges, and faces by selecting one, and then shift selecting another one. When you are in vertex mode, which is 1 on the top of the keyboard, you can select a ring of vertices. If you hold down the Alt key and then click in the center of vertex, right along the edge loop, you can select a horizontal row of vertices. If you hold down the Alt key and then click on the vertex above or below the edge loop, you can select a vertical row of vertices. You can then add the Shift key and select multiple rows of vertices. When you're in Edge Select mode, which is 2 on your keyboard, you can select an entire edge loop. If you hold down the Alt key and then click in the center of an edge, you select a horizontal edge loop. If you hold down the Alt key and then click where two edges meet, you select the vertical edge loop. You can then add the Shift key and select multiple edge loops. When you are in Face Select mode, which is 3 on your keyboard, you can select an entire row of faces. If you hold down your Alt key and then click in the center of a face, you can select a horizontal row of faces. If you hold down the Alt key and then select where two faces meet, you can select a vertical row of faces. You can then add the Shift key and select multiple rows of faces. Two other hotkeys which are useful when modeling are the more or less options. If you select a vertex, edge, or face, you can easily select more or less based around your selection. For example, if we select a face on the sphere and we hit Control, then numpad plus, we will expand the selection. If we hit Control numpad minus, we shrink the selection. Proportional editing allows us to edit more softly than simply selecting individual vertices, edges, or faces. If we choose one vertex from the top of the sphere and begin moving it, you will notice that it has a very sharp edge without any sort of fall off. This is really an inefficient way of modeling. This is where proportional editing comes in. We can turn on proportional editing by either clicking on the icon at the top center of the viewport or by hitting the letter O. So go ahead and turn on proportional editing. Choose the topmost vertex and begin to move it. You can see now that we have a gradual fall off rather than a sharp edge. We can also change the amount of area that we are affecting. Notice a circle surrounding the cursor. Scrolling up and down with the middle mouse button will change the amount of area that we affect. Once we have the circle the size we want, we can just move the cursor. And as we move the cursor, we can continue to resize the area. Once we have finished the modification, we just need to left click to lock in the modification. An easy option for moving objects precisely in Blender is to use Snap. Let's delete the UV sphere and then add a cube to the scene. The easiest way to snap objects is to snap to the grid. Choose the Snap option which is the little magnet icon in the top center of the viewport, and move the cube with the G key. Notice that the cube snaps to the grid. We can also snap faces, edges, and vertices. Choose Face Select Mode, which is 3 on your keyboard, and make sure that Snap is activated. Left click on the top face to choose it, and then pull it straight down along the Z-axis using G and then Z. Notice that when we get close to the bottom face, the top face snaps to it and it becomes a plane. You can undo that snapping using Ctrl Z. Now go into Edge Select Mode, 2 on your keyboard, and make sure that Snap is activated. Left click on the front edge to choose it, and then pull it straight along the X-axis by using G, then X. Notice that when you get close to the back edge, the 2 edges snap together. Undo the snapping procedure by Ctrl Z. Now go into Vertex Select Mode, which is 1 on the keyboard. Make sure Snap is activated. Then left click on the top front vertex to choose it. And then move it along the X-axis using G, then X. Notice when you get close to the back vertex, the 2 vertices snap together. The extrusion tool is one of the most important tools used in any 3D modeling program. We can extrude faces, edges, or vertices. Delete the default cube and add a cylinder. Make sure you're in Edit mode and that you are in Face Select mode. Choose one face with the left mouse button. If you click and hold the extrude tool in the toolbar, you notice that we have 4 extrude options. Extrude region is the most basic extrusion. If we use the E key and move our mouse, we can extrude the selected face. Then left clicking will lock in the extrusion. Notice that it is only the one face that is extruded. Use Ctrl Z to undo the extrusion. When multiple faces, edges, or vertices are chosen, extrude region and extrude individual work differently. So let's shift click on 3 separate faces. Now when we choose extrude region, you see that the extrusion operates the same way as it did with only a single vertex selected. Use Ctrl Z to undo that extrusion. Then choose 3 unconnected faces. This time, use the extrude individual and extrude the faces. Notice that the 3 faces are now extruding individually along their normals. Use Ctrl Z to undo the extrusion. Then select 2 faces on the opposite side of the cylinder. This time, choose Extrude Along Normals. Then use the manipulator to extrude the faces. Notice that the 2 faces are now extruding along the normals. Use Ctrl Z to undo that extrusion. Select the top face of the cylinder, and this time choose Extrude to Cursor option. Now left click anywhere above and to the side of the cylinder. Notice the extrusion now follows the cursor. All of these extrusion techniques work not just on faces, but vertices and edges as well. In the next Blender 2.83 Basics tutorial, we will be exploring materials and textures. If you're interested in learning more about 3D art and animation, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.